Hi there. Today I'm going to show you how to make this pot holder. The pattern for the pot holder is available. The link is in the description below. If you can't find it there, you can go to my website, soitlikeaman.com. Check under the free stuff link. So this pot holder, the features of this pot holder feature some miter corners that actually wrap around from the back. So there's no bias binding tape to this, and what this does is it creates a nice little picture window. So say if you have some pretty fabric you want to put on here. It also requires some batting. So the total dimensions of the fabric that is needed here for the self fabric, 9 inches by 11 inches for this backing that wraps around to the front. That includes the hanger loop. The contrasting fabric, which is the center here for the picture window, is 6.5 inches by 6.5 inches. Also, you need batting of that same size. So if you're going to go purchase fabric, you're going to want a 1/4 yard of fabric, but you want to be careful that 9 inches is actually the height of the pattern piece, and that is exactly 1/4 of a yard. So you might want to purchase a little bit extra. However, the way I have created this pattern is that you should be able to cut 4 of them out of a fat 1/4. And those of you who don't know what a fat 1/4 is, that's basically 22 inches by 18 inches, which is a square 1/4 yard of fabric. So you should be able to get 4 of these, at least with the body fabric. You'll need extra for the contrast center, but you should be able to cut 4 of the body fabrics out of a fat 1/4. So let's talk about the batting for just a few minutes. The batting that I'm going to be using is this Wrap and Zap from Potholder, and I like this because it's 100% natural and it's cotton. The other thing that I like about this is that it is microwavable, so if you need to throw it in there with a dish, it's not going to have a problem being in the microwave. I also like it because you can layer this with ease. It has a really nice hand to it. It's soft, and even people with allergies, it shouldn't affect them. But you can actually layer this really nicely to give it a little bit more loft if one layer is not thick enough for you. The other kind of batting that you could use is what's called a thermolam. And this is usually made out of a combination of fibers, but I felt like for this project this was a little bit too stiff. I didn't like the way it felt. The other kind of batting you could use is this insole fleece that they call it. It's number 975 in the Potholder, but be aware that this has aluminum in it along with some fuzzy polyester that's been punched into it. This cannot be microwaved, so I would be careful about using this, especially if you're going to be selling these later somewhere else. The cotton fabric is much preferred for this. It's natural, and it lasts a pretty good long time. Anyway, I used 1 layer of the Wrap and Zap cotton batting for this. So as you can see, it's fairly thin. You may want to use 2 layers if you want a little bit more loft to your pot holder. So let's talk about the patterns. So on the second page of the pattern is a warning here. The way you need to be printing out the pattern is in actual size. When you get to your print monitor, make sure that you have selected actual size, not fit to page. If you select fit to page, it's going to change the dimensions of the pattern, and your pot holder won't come out the right size or the size that you thought it would be. So always check actual size. These 2 front pages do not need to be printed. The following pages are the actual pattern. This is the pattern piece for the main body. This is where on the striped fabric, that's what piece this is. And I put here cut unfold, and the reason I did that is because the pattern is too big for 8.5 by 11. Also, for people in other countries, these are formatted to print A4 size. So either you can fold over your fabric, or you can print another one and tape them together. The other pieces also for the window, piece, which is this piece, is also cut on fold, and that's so that I could get a pattern piece on here for your hanger loop. I've chosen to go ahead and cut a print two and tape them together. You could also cut this out and just copy this onto a folded piece of paper and use that. Let's talk about this main body potholder pattern piece for just 1 minute. So I have these 6 notches that are here. There'll also be 6 on the other side once you open it up. These are your sewing instructions, basically. We're gonna fold over here on this side before we sew, but this angled seam is what we call a miter seam, and it's sewn at a 45-degree angle, and that is what helps fold this over to create this window. So we're actually going to punch these out and use and clip small amounts of these so we know where to fold and where to sew, okay? So I've gone ahead and I've cut these out previously, and so I wanted to show you putting this together, these pattern pieces together. So I've actually printed 2 out and I've cut them, and I'm actually just going to put these straight together and tape this together and use this as one pattern piece. The other things that I've done ahead of time is that I've actually punched out my notches, and I've actually used a pattern notch, that's why they look so clean. But you can actually just use your scissors if you're going to clip on these as well. The other piece that I need to make a full pattern piece of is my window. So I've cut this out on the dotted line, and I'm just gonna tape this together. Now this will make it a little bit easier for cutting the fabric out if you don't want to fold over your fabric, or if you're going to use the fat quarter and you're going to use this piece, line these up exactly on the edges here for cutting. That will make it a lot easier for you. So I pre-cut my fabrics out, and one of the things that I wanted to show you, this is my back that also wraps around to the front. But I need to cut the notches, and I wanted to do that so that you could see how I'm doing this. So understand that this seam here, and I'll bring the pothole, creates this miter seam here, and my seam allowance here is 1/4 inch. So when I clip my notches, I want to make very small clips. Don't go beyond the 1/4 inch. In fact, you probably want to only clip in maybe about 1/8 of an inch. That will save you from clipping too far, and then you would have a hole in your seam. I'm going to do this really quick. Now, of course, if you're a really experienced sewer, you probably don't need to do these clips if you know what 1/4 inch is. Okay, so I've done clipping. What I'm going to do first, before I actually start folding these over, I'm going to make it a little bit easier. I'm going to turn this over so I can see the wrong side of the fabric. And on this edge here, where I had those side notches, these notches here would go here. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to fold these over that 1/4 of an inch and press it down. I'm going to bring my little pressing mat in here and do this so you can see it, but my iron is still hot. So fold over at the notch, and because this is cotton, a basic plain weave, I can kind of finger press that a little bit. I'm going to press that down. My iron went to sleep, so it's just slowly warming up again. Okay, so now that all 4 sides are pressed, it doesn't have to be perfect right now. Just make sure you get at least a nice edge that is defined. Now I'm going to turn this over and grab my pins. And on that center notch here, we're gonna fold it there, match our edges. And I like to just kind of pin that together here. Okay? You're gonna do this with all of these corners. So fold in the center notch, match it, match your edges. And I just put 1 pin in here to hold this. Now if you notice when you're folding up here, your edges actually align right along each other. That's how you know you're getting your good 45-degree angle, which will create, again, this miter, this clean miter edge. Let's fold the last 2, pin them. Okay, and then what we're gonna do is we're actually gonna sew a 1/4" seam right across here. Remove your pin before you sew, but 1/4" seam all the way down. Okay, let's have a look at what these pins kind of like. They make this little bowl shape, right? Okay, so now we're gonna go over to the sewing machine. Okay, so now we're going to sew 1/4" seam allowance along this edge. And when I put my fabric up under the needles, instead of sticking the needle right here at the very edge, I like to stick the needle in a little bit so that the feed dogs can definitely grab that short area, and then I'll backstitch to cover up this end part. So my 1/4" is roughly the edge of my presser foot. I'm gonna grab this pin. Okay, I backstitched a little too much, but you want to backstitch at the end here, at both ends, at the beginning and the end. Okay, so I'm gonna go around, I'm gonna do the rest of my miters. Oops, this is not working for me right now. Okay, so now all of my corners have been sewn. Let's go back over to the pressing mat. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to trim all my threads. make everything meet here. Okay, and then what we're gonna need to do, you can already see here, oops, I forgot one. Here, if we're looking at the wrong side, it's already kind of creating that window. So now we're gonna turn these face side out. So I probably shouldn't do this, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'm using my snips, the pointed edges, to curve, to turn those points right side out. Sometimes I say face side, that means the right side of the fabric. Just make sure that you don't poke holes through these corners. Okay, once you've got that all done, now we start seeing a nice little window. These threads out here, right? So if your corners aren't as pointy as you would like them, you could trim that corner if you want to. I tend not to like to trim these because I worry that it weakens it, but you could trim that corner a little bit and then push it to the right side like that. But sometimes you can take your fingers and just kind of work it a little bit. So what I like to do now is just very lightly, don't hard press this yet. I'm just going to soft press kind of the corner a little bit. Make sure that you're still getting that folded edge, and I'm not letting the iron actually set on all the way down. I'm just kind of going over it lightly. Put some steam into it, and then you can kind of press it down. If you press this hard, and I kind of press it a little bit more here, then your edge will be kind of really flat and you'll lose some of the loft. These extra. Okay, so there's our nice little picture window. So now I've pre-cut my other piece. This is my window piece. I have some Christmas lights here, and then I have my batting, that wrap and zap it batting here that's gonna go here. Now you can go ahead and quilt this with stitch lines if you'd like, before, or any way decoration you would like beforehand. I'm not going to do that because I like it kind of more puffy. Anyway, let's get this set in here, and the way I like to do this is it should be approximately the size of that window, right? And I like to put this on top of here, lift this up, and then open up, pull this corner up, and then just kind of tuck this corner in like that. And I'll do that all the way around. So I have the fabric and the batting, hold on to that, lift up the corner edge, and then just kind of push that corner in. And once I've got two, you can actually push the rest of that into that edge. Okay, corner, this into this corner, and it folds. It will lay and fold right in there very nicely. Now if you need to even it out, I'm going to pull this a little bit on this side, even that out a little bit. Okay, so flatten that. That looks pretty good. So now what I'm going to do is I'll need to sew this down, this window. But what I'm going to do first is I'm going to actually put a pin here in each of the sides. That will actually keep it in place. Things won't move around as much. Okay. Okay, now I'm going to go over to a sewing machine. I'm going to stitch this down all the way around. Okay. Okay, so I'm gonna start my top stitching here right on the edge of my frame part here, and you can start anywhere you want around, but I'm gonna start somewhere up here in the corner, not on the corner, but a little bit ways away. I think this is where I'm gonna want to put my hanger loop, so that's why I'm gonna start here. That's why I'm gonna start here. Kind of takes a distraction if it's anywhere else. So I'm gonna put my needle down, and now just right here on the edge, pulling my pins out as I go. Now when I come up, I want to put the needle in here, right in the corner, so that I can pivot. Doesn't that look like a good spot? And you can just kind of check to make sure that your needle is still going to sew along right onto your framed fabric area. Of course, you don't have to do a straight stitch. You could do a zigzag stitch, or you could use a decorative stitch to get this sewn down. That's up to you. There's also you could cover this section with ribbon, and I actually have one done like that. I will show you at the end what that looks like. Okay, now remember at the beginning here I did not backstitch, so what I want to do when I'm coming back around is I'm not going to backstitch. I'm actually just going to sew over my original stitching. I like to do it for about an inch. Not a big backstitch person. That way, just in case you don't get a big mess of thread here. Okay, so we're done stitching here. Let's go back over to the pressing table. Okay, so basically at this point the potholder is basically done. I'm going to trim my threads really quick. Basically it's done. Okay, and there's the picture window, and that's what the backside looks like. But now we need to create the loop, and I've got my piece cut here. And this is pretty easy to do. I like to fold this in half to give me a little bit of a crease, and then I'm going to fold both ends in to match that, and then I'm going to fold it over again. So fold this in half. Okay. If I can get this open. And then I like to fold one end in first to that crease line. And then I will match the other side. And then I'm gonna fold them in on top of each other. Now if you have an extra piece of, double fold binding laying around that you want to use, you can do that, use that as well. It doesn't have to be the same fabric as this. So basically now that this has been all folded in, I'm going to stitch this down here on the folded edge, and then I'm going to stay at the sewing machine to do the next part. I'm going to fold it in half, and then I will imagine where my stitch line is going to be. I'm going to stitch in a 1/4 inch, and I'm going to imagine that that 1/4 inch stitch line is in the middle of this miter. So I'll stitch it here, and then I'm going to fold it up again, and then I'll stitch it down to cover up the raw edge of my loop. Okay, so let's go back over to the sewing machine. Okay, so here we are. So I've folded my loop my hanger loop here, and now I'm going to stitch it closed together. You can backstitch at the top and the bottom if you want. I think I'm just going to sew through because this is going to be stitched. That part is going to be stitched down, so I don't think that it's going to pull out. Okay, so there's my loop. I'm going to trim up these ends with threads really quick. So remember, where was the corner that I started? I started here, I can see it. So this is where I want to put my hanger loop. So again, I'm gonna fold this in half, right? Then I'm gonna imagine where my stitch line is, 1/4 of an inch. And that 1/4 of an inch stitch line is gonna meet here about the middle of that miter seam. So it's gonna look like the raw edge is off center. That's okay because your stitch line will actually be here at about the middle point of this miter seam. So I'll put that in, it's gonna be 1/4 inch. And I will be ready to backstitch, go slow. So you're just stitching across that loop, okay? So now the loop is sewn on. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna fold this over that, and now I'm gonna stitch, you see where, here where, if you can see that with the light, right here where the raw edge is, I'm going to fold that over, and that approximately just on the other side of that is probably approximately where I'm going to stitch the loop down again. That way it will hide my raw edge there. And I'm gonna back stitch over that. I'm going really slow because I can barely see what I'm doing. So I went over a little bit, but I can rip those out without a problem. Okay, so I've got this on. Went over maybe a stitch. I could probably rip those out and then just kind of tack it down again just for, you know, so it doesn't look that messy. Okay, so basically I've just finished the pot holder, but let's go back over to the pressing table. Okay, so here's the pot holder. I'm going to clip these threads off here of that hanger loop, front and back. Okay, now I've got my hanger loop there. You could of course put the loop anywhere around. I'm actually going to turn this over real quick, and I'm just going to press it from this side a little bit first, and then do this side. Pull all these. Whoops, got one right here. So, comparison. Of course, now I have 2 new pot holders. These make really great Christmas gifts if you don't know what to do, if you just have scraps of fabric. I did mention while I was putting that loop sewing around here that you could also cover it with some ribbon, and I've done that in this case. This is 3/8 wide ribbon. If I did this again, I'd probably use 1/2 inch just to make sure that that seam actually does get covered. If you do this, you don't really necessarily need to fold the ends on the pattern. This part here, you don't necessarily need to fold that first. You can just sew your miter corners because you're going to be covering that raw edge with the ribbon. You could also use some rickrack, grosgrain ribbon, anything that, you know, won't melt if it's going to be having a hot pot on it. Okay, so I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial. Again, you can get the pattern free in the link below, or simply just check out my website at sewitlikeaman.com.